To conclude, I want to thank all speakers and all participants for joining us for this virtual session that does not facilitate the discussion as we saw. Now that we have shared insights on pathways and solutions to handle the effect of the restriction of value chain, we may attempt an answer to the webinar question: has COVID created new challenges or is an opportunity to enhance the sustainability of value chains? However, this is a difficult question to answer because amongst other reasons, the COVID crisis is still ongoing. A first point of conclusion for me is that the exercise was tricky, even if useful, trying to understand how the actors of these value chains have reacted to a sudden, rather uncontrolled and original crisis without any real appropriate information system for this could seem like a real challenge. I think the experts have done rather well, and have given significant insights to understand what happened and how finally this crisis reveals deeper problems in this value chain. Even if we have to be careful with the conclusions without more evidence. For example, we need to be careful to not stigmatize export markets and glorify local agri-food system and short supply chains, even if they were a part of the solution. Export value chain remain strategic for many countries. More generally, I think that this crisis allows us to rethink and potentially renew strategies for these value chains. It is an opportunity, if necessary, to revamp the dialogue between policymakers and the private sector and take actions which can enhance sustainability and inclusiveness in these chains. Another point is that data matters for a fact-based and transparent EU action. This exercise of the webinar on this subject seemed to me initially out of step with the principles of VCA4D, where studies are based on the production of evidence-based information and the quantitative assessment of indicators to feed sustainable development strategies in the long run, while the purpose here is to find solutions to overcome problems and come out of a crisis based necessarily on a qualitative approach with gaps of information. It is more a response than a strategy. However, at the end, the exercise was greatly facilitated for the experts because an in-depth knowledge and baselines of the value chains were available. This reminds us of the importance of collecting information over time. A quantitative approach like VCA4D can help monitor the situation faster and act more rapidly if it is not done for this purpose. In a way, this webinar showed the value of the VCA4D initiative, analyzing the extent to which a value chain is viable, competitive and sustainable beyond feeding long-term development strategies is also useful in understanding how actors can cope with adversity. We hope that this webinar will have been useful in the context of the European Green Deal, the top priority of the European Commission and roadmap for the EU recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie-Helene, and thank you to all participants for a very good afternoon or good evening or good morning, wherever we are. I would say that my final takeaway from this, first of all, I think many people imagine that COVID would just last longest for 6 months, but it seems like it's not going away that quickly. So when we are looking at it, it's not just in terms of how to recover from its effects, but also how to be able to operate efficiently, promote sustainable and inclusive growth in priority value chains whilst it is still prevalent. So that is one issue that we need to bear in mind. And it's also clear that most of the issues that were identified as challenges in the various value chains which have been looked at were not created or did not emerge as a result of COVID. They existed before COVID, and unless they are addressed, will continue to exist well after COVID has been brought under control. But what has happened is that the incidence of COVID may have accentuated some of them, including impacts on social impact, which have been identified. Some of the environmental impacts are yet to be identified clearly, but it's really important that we monitor them, even whilst we work to generate more evidence on the social impact. I think for me, one of the interesting things is that, especially if you look at the food staples, it is apparent that it is not just COVID and logistics systems for transacting, but also government interventions. And I think this in a way will respond to the question from the EUD in Abuja, whether this pandemic is going to actually lead to an accentuation of the food security crisis in some communities in Nigeria. And in the short term, what one can say is that the easing of import restrictions makes it possible for that particular risk to be eased. But if the government is still going to maintain restrictions on exports, then it's going to impact on producer incentives, especially for the producers in the northern part of the country, and that may have long-term implications. It's also evident that there will be long-term implications from the disruptions that have occurred in terms of input supply and access by smallholder farmers. So it's something that we need to be mindful of. Some of the solutions that are emerging across the various countries look very interesting, particularly the use of ICT in the provision of extension services, as well as facilitating input procurement and output marketing. These systems need to be deployed. In particular, any system that makes it possible for people to transact without having to be physically close to each other. These needs to be promoted as much as possible. And it is something that we would have to continue working on. We haven't, in the course of this discussion, come to very conclusive recommendations because we are still working on the evidence that needs to go to support these. But what we are hoping is that this will be just a starting point, and we will continue to work to generate more robust evidence so that the conversations between policymakers and actors in the value chains would be underpinned by that type of evidence, and it would contribute to the emergence of efficient, sustainable, and inclusive agricultural and fisheries value chains. So I believe that this is going to be the beginning of some level of collaboration between us all, and we look forward to further engagements and opportunities to look into some of these questions in more depth. On that note, thank you all very much for your participation. And while we will share the presentations, we'll also look at all the questions that have been submitted, especially those that haven't been addressed, and engage in further discussions with those who raise those questions, and share also the responses with as many as will be interested. Thank you all very much and have a very wonderful evening. Unless, Georgia, if you have any final announcements to make, this is your opportunity.
Yes, thanks a lot, Gideon. Thanks to everyone for the participation. And as Gideon also said, we will follow with the questions. And again, as if you want more information on the VCA4D project, you can access the capacity for that page or write to us to this address. We are happy we receive a lot of questions. We would have loved to reply to all, but you know, it's time constraints, but we are very happy, and thanks a lot for your participation also to the EU policy officer. Many thanks. And